So I am, of course, as you can imagine, somebody of Indian heritage. But our grandparents migrated to Africa, and I was born and brought up in Uganda. Then in 1968, I came to study here in the UK to do my A-levels, and then went to University of Manchester until 72. I was doing my masters, and this was in economics and finance. 72, as many of you may know or have heard about, Mr. Idi Amin decided to throw all the Ugandan Asians out. So just as I was completing my masters, I was landed with 27 refugees from our family here. We had 127 pounds in our account, and 27 people. A lot of them, of course, my younger brothers and nephews and so on, still doing their O-levels and A-levels and whatever. So, despite my professor's offer to pay for my PhD, there wasn't any luxury to do that. I had to start work. My cousin was a pharmacist, also had to start work, and both of us piled into the thing, started to support these people and slowly built up. So I luckily managed at that time, for that time it was quite a coup, to find a job at the Prudential Assurance Company as an investment analyst. That time this was a very, very white, blue-blooded profession. But to get in was lucky. Thankfully it was also through a migrant, because the chief economist of the Prudential at that time was a person from Malta. And he told me, "Are you a refugee from Uganda?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm a refugee from Malta. Welcome, start tomorrow." So, okay, we had the qualifications, obviously, but to get there was a big job at those times, right? So, alhamdulillah, we got that. That was one of the best training places, Omar, I could say one could have. Because the Prudential was the biggest institutional investor. Every big company used to come to them to see whatever they wanted to do, take over somebody, change, do any kind of things. They would come, and then the analysts responsible would advise the management as to what would be our stance and so on. So in terms of training, you had access to the best minds and the best, managers. So we used to go to like CEOs of Rolls-Royce, GEC, whoever, and then say, "I'm from the Prudential." Say, "Okay, fine, come, let's have a discussion. What are you doing? What's happening?" and so on. So we picked up our basic skills there. My personal journey into Islamic finance started one day when I had a call from Professor Khurshid Ahmed. He said to me, "Look, I have heard that you are doing well in your work, and somebody has recommended me, so would you like to go to Makkah?" I said, "For what?" He said, "There is going to be a first conference on Islamic economics." I said, "Prof, I don't know anything about Islamic economics, really. But I would love to go to Makkah." Of course, and make Umrah at your expense. And we had 200 Muslim economists from all over the world whom they had gathered together for a week. And we just learned everything about Islamic economics at that point in time. The main idea was that look guys, we have now finished with colonialism. We have money from the 72 oil price rise and so on. We need to think to take our destiny in our own hands and manage our finance according to Islam. But the main discussion was that, look, we cannot talk about Islamic economics. If we start telling governments you have to do this and change this and change this, they will throw us out and say, "Please go back home and don't disturb us." Can you imagine us telling the Saudi government or the Pakistani government that you are not Islamic? So he said, let's start under the radar. Let's start seeing if we can do Islamic finance in any way. And that time it was fully profit and loss sharing finance. Really idealistic. The key driver was Prince Muhammad Al Faisal. He established Faisal Islamic Bank and so on. Dubai Islamic Bank, Dalla Al Baraka of Sheikh Saleh Kamil. They had their initial forays into profit and loss sharing, and they lost quite a bit of money. It started in a very strange way, that you had lots of reputable business people, and people used to come and deposit their money with them for safekeeping. And then this guy started to have an idea that maybe less than 10% of it is asked for at any one time. Can we use the 90% to give it to other people and make money on it? So they went and they started lending. And they started making money on it. And clearly, even according to Christianity, this was usury. So sooner or later, they went to the Pope and said, we're making lots of money in this way. What do you have to say? It seems to me that the church authorities said, as long as you pay 10-15% tax on it, it will be all made halal for you. So you can continue. So it became a big business. One of the problems with Luther when his Reformation was this, you can't just wish away every sin by paying for it, right? You have to really be a good person. Eventually, obviously, the main loophole in this structure was that if somebody was not able to pay on demand, because he had lent, become greedy, they will run on the bank. And then from there, this banker of last resort, central bank evolved, and so on. So that was, the Muslim world had missed out on that development, because they were either pre-colonial or really in decline. So they were not interested in it. They missed out on this banking development. So the banking came to us from here. And so with its own regulations and its own limitations on any kind of participation finance.
Do you think that still stays at the heart of the problem?
It does, Banking regulation,
globally.
Banking regulation does not allow you participation finance, full stop. So he said, my friend, I don't know, whether we can regulate this stuff within our structure. There are strange things which I don't understand. So luckily, Ahmad Mohammed Don, who was the governor of Bank of Negara, he said, Governor, we are doing it in Malaysia. We've started. It seems to be working fine. Our regulatory structure is mirrored on yours. We have been able to accommodate, so you should be able to do it. So to his credit, Lord Eddie George said, fine, we will establish a committee to look into this. And we worked for 2 years to produce a report which showed to the governor what were the key challenges which were going to be faced if you want to introduce these products within our regulatory structure. There were several things which could be done by secondary legislation, so it didn't require any big, just required will. But there were a couple of things which needed primary legislation. And one of the big things was the stamp duty question. For Islamic transactions, you have the bank buying the thing and then selling it on. So there are two sales effectively rather than one. Luckily, we had Gordon Brown as Chancellor, who was very supportive. Finally, I think in the 2005 Finance Bill, we managed to change the law. And the foundation was laid by Lord Eddie George. And it was laid in Markfield on that day. We asked Lord Eddie George, why did you help us? He said, look, let me tell you something. I had some very good neighbors, Muslim neighbors. And one day we invited them for dinner, and they looked very, strangely, he said, they looked happy and sad. They said, we're very happy because we got our house possession today. But we're unhappy because we had to take it through a mortgage which we don't believe is halal. He said, that drove me to help you people. There was a house in Leicester, a bigger house which they had renovated, and it became the Islamic Foundation, and they started, it was set up by Professor Khurshid and Khorram Jah and so on.
Roughly
um, 75, 76, around that time just. So they began to mobilize activities and so on. Publications, they started some publications, you see the early publications, some of the writings of Maulana Maududi, some of the writings on Islamic economics and so on. Later on, when they managed to collect funds, they bought the place in Markfield. The importance of Markfield is that Professor Khurshid, because of his interest, established the Center for Islamic Economics there in that time, in the early 80s, I would say. They used to have many activities, but one very, very mentionable activity was we had they had organized a conference.
Roughly when?
This is 85, I think, yeah.
Markfield has the UK's largest Islamic finance library in English.
It's built that time.
Yeah.
It's built on that time. It
Yeah.
was supported and joined up with the King Abdulaziz University. There was a person called Abdullah Nasif there, professor, who then, from that conference, it grew that we need a center here and build. And they had a magazine of Islamic economics for many years. Then they started a program in Islamic finance and so on. But then Professor Khurshid was called back to Pakistan.
So this is 1980s you're talking about?
80s it started, but
1980s.
1990s, just around 2000, he was
Yeah.
called back, and so they lost the focus. And they set up HSBC Amana as follow. And they started to roll out home finance here. That is where Amjad Bhai comes in, yes. HSBC took the idea very seriously. And they commissioned us, me and one or two other people, to train all their staff into Islamic finance products. You see, then, and this is where the problem started coming. Yeah, Sir John Bond retired, so Stephen Green took over, who was also very supportive, mind you. And then financial crisis hit. Now by that time they had 3,000 home finance rolled out. It was going well. So I said to Zair, what is this? Why are you strangling this place? He said, look, Iqbal, let me tell you in Gujarati, plain fact is that it is profitable. I think they were making between 5 and 10 million pounds at that time on the book. But it is not making enough, you understand? This is before the crisis, right? If you show me how to make 50 million, I can push it. I said, I can't do it tomorrow, but I can do it in 5 years. He said, no, that's too long.
If it's 5-10 million, so their loan book must be over $500 million then, right?
Between half and $1 billion,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. And only that kind of institution can support that capital.
Yeah. And then a big hit for the industry.
Very
Then
big hit.
To lose HSBC.
Yeah, it was crippling. Nobody could build $1 billion book. I mean, even the Al Rayyan is struggling now with $250 million or something. So yes, but if you imagine HSBC was still in the space, we were looking at 30,000-40,000 solid home finances. Then I joined something called the Third World Network. You don't know about that part of my life, yeah. This was a very big NGO campaigning institution based out of Malaysia. So I go there and Uncle said, look, I need you to really become part of our team because we need somebody to advise us on international development, global economic flows, GATT negotiations, world trade. Yeah. So I became their lead person. I went to the World Bank. I became chair of the World Bank NGO committee on these issues. That's the CBE for Contribution to International Development. Yeah, that's from there. Yeah. Because we then...
That was when? What year were you awarded the CBE?
CBE in 2005.
Right.
But it was 10 years, 15 years work before that. Okay. Mostly leading up to, designing accountability in the bank or towards poverty reduction. And ultimately, of course, that led to the UN MDGs and then SDGs. We didn't make the MDGs, but we laid the groundwork to say that every bank funding must have an idea of what it achieves
Yeah.
Not just, what we say in Urdu Shairi, that yes, we are poverty reduction and we are the best poverty reduction outfit. What?
Yeah.
Have you done anything in school education, literacy,
Yeah.
this, that? And that obviously that's what the MDGs were designed
All
to
this
do.
is full circle now, with the SDGs
Yes.
and the UNPRB.
Yes.
How does that, how do you feel?
I feel
looking at
very
this?
encouraged
It's
that.
like in the 90s we were talking about
Yeah.
this and nothing much has happened. We've had a global banking crisis, unprecedented, and now they're talking the same hula.
Well, in some ways, the banking crisis has helped. It
Yeah.
has served as a wake-up
Yeah.
call to people that unless we do something, but I don't know if it will end up in another crisis before we really do something.
Yeah.
But at the moment, the talk in the town is responsible finance, ethical finance,
Yeah.
whatever. Everybody is jumping, renewable finance,
Yeah.
and so on, which is good. I think people are beginning to think.
Yeah.
And some people are beginning to implement things. We would only know this kind of people who want a bigger car and a bigger house and a bigger house and a bigger car and that. What is the point of that?
Mm-hmm.
Here, we are fine. We are not starving. We are managing. Thank God, we are okay.
Mhm.
Children are educated, everything. But we know so many people in the world. And if we have contributed something, like, we had a meeting through the Third World Network. There was a South Center in Geneva. We had a meeting. Julius Nyerere, ex-president of Tanzania, Manmohan Singh, that time retired governor of the Federal Reserve Bank of India, Gamani Korea, finance minister of Ceylon, we were there. Manmohan Singh says, and me and Martin Kaur from Third World Network, he says, look, I've got an invitation from the Prime Minister. That time it was, I think, Radhakrishna. I have an invitation to become finance minister. What do you think, all of you? I said, Manmohan, I know you are coming from the same background as me. We are roughly left of center. We don't like big business and stuff like that. We want to help the people. So let's look at it this way. 600 million people in India are below the poverty line at that time. I think some of these reforms, if we are able to do, which we are going to talk about, will put 300 million of those out of poverty. However wealthy you are, you cannot do that. It is institutional and structural. So we had those kind of moments where you feel that actually you have maybe made small contribution to, something big.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Or Islamic finance, something big, at least given confidence to people that, look, we can do it, let's do it. Or things, which really fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
Plus meeting all these people. I mean, how would I meet those 200 Muslim economists if I am working at the Peru as a top analyst? After the 76 conference, which was I was still at the Prudential, so I sent a discussion point to Atullah Bakr Sadr, who has written the book Iqtisaduna.
Okay.
He was an Iraqi scholar.
Yeah.
And he's written the first book called Bank La Rabawiyya. He's the first scholar to design a jurisprudential view of how to establish an interest-free banking. And Kuwait Finance House adopted it and so on, right? So I said, Sir, I want to leave this and become an Islamic economist. And he said, no. I said, I want you to be the best economist first. When you're confident of that, then you go into Islam. We need people who know what they're talking about. We don't need people. So a lot of people come to me and say, look, Iqbal bhai, I'm working banking, is riba. And I said, okay, fine. Spend time, learn, and then chart your way out. Don't jump and do silly things.
Did you chart your way out? Or did you jump?
No. When I paid my mortgage off, I felt quite free.
So would you say then the learning there is to liberate yourself rather than to get another bigger house and get even
bigger
more
house,
expensive?
bigger mortgage, then you're stuck again.
So to liberate or to minimize your debt obligations.
So my father used to say that, look, in this country, if you don't have a mortgage, If you run into hard times, the Queen will feed you. That was his language.
Queen will feed you.
But mortgage is a big problem.
Yeah.
And you know, and I have some of the contacts from the Prudential still. Some of them are just trapped in huge mortgages and debts, big car loans, and God knows what. I said, why do you need that? What do you want to do? They don't have any peace of mind. Muslim economists, if I am working at the Pru as a top analyst. Islamic Finance 1.0 is complete. But to move to 2.0 is a step change.
So where are we heading right now? So that summarizes where we're at, but where is the industry heading? What direction is it heading in? It sounds like stagnation.
It's stagnation.
And it sounds like what you said,
it's like
duplication.
yeah, it's like stagnation and probably decline if we stay there, because we cannot stay there.
Yeah.
Because once the dynamism goes, you know, the capital flows and everything will go down. So it needs new product design, innovative product design and movement.
So is the current direction where it's being lack of innovation and this kind of quasi-stagnation, is that desirable then, or clearly?
It's not. It is a little bit worrying because, you know, now if somebody comes to me and says, Iqbal bhai, I want to have an Islamic mortgage or Islamic home finance, what am I going to tell him? With a hand on my heart, and say, brother or sister, have you got any alternative? Can I show you something which might be equally good? This is not the kind of thing I want. I want to say, go to here, get it, yes?
So do you think the industry as it currently is has met the ethical aspirations of the stakeholders of the customer?
No. They are disappointed.
So aspirational dissatisfaction is real?
It's very real. You can talk to any Muslim professional and they will tell you. If they trust you, they'll tell you, Omar bhai, please leave it out. Two things here. I think people, when they see, people criticize things in very, very subtle ways, Omar.
Unless you're Scottish, in which case you go straight for the...
No. I mean, ordinary people, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, one of my researchers on the Lloyd project, she was from the University of Westminster. She was an Irish woman. She's a very smart researcher. So, I said to her, look, 10 years ago, when I went to Dublin, every car in the airport was 7-seater. Because they had big families. Last year, when I went to Dublin, there was no 7-seater. Has there been a change in birth control law? She said, no, we still. I said, so how does this family shrink from 5 to 2? So people are giving a subtle message that, look guys, this is not working, we're going to do what we're going to do. Similarly, if you ask people, they will not say this is haram or anything, but you want to get them to take it up. So in their heart, they feel that there's nothing there to excite me, right? And this is my worry, that it is, we need to find ways to dig it out. And I feel that going towards the ESG kind of stuff will excite quite a number of young people in our communities. So we need to develop products which will go there. Of course, there is tension, and those, when the big guys were there, the Citibanks and the Ambanas and things, they come with structures, and the scholars were left with very little choice to say yes or no. And if you have seen this book, Heaven's Bankers, have you seen it, by Haris Irfan? Well, he was one of the leading edge practitioners at that time. So you can see the kind of big time tensions we had in that space. I think the scholars are much more confident now, but there is still quite a lot of corporate governance issues, because they serve on more than one board, sometimes on boards of competing institutions, sometimes on boards using competing interpretations like on screening and so on. So that's one. The second one is that obviously they are paid by the companies. And as you know, you have been working on this, there is no central regulation of scholars. So if somebody does wrong, apart from Malaysia now, there's no sanction. He says, okay, I gave you this fatwa last week, but this week is not allowed, so what are you going to do? Well, there's a reputational risk here. So I think there will, if the industry grows here significantly, there will need to be some kind of accountability on that side to build into, that. Because I'm sure the regulators will also demand that people who are relevant persons in terms of investment, who can influence the value of the institution, need to be regulated, either directly or indirectly, like the accountants and lawyers and so on, with sanction from their professional institutes. And I think that's still very much work in progress, for sure. Yeah, they started out from a premise which was wrong in itself. They started out from a premise that as long as it is Islamic, it is ethical, full stop. So only yesterday, one person, I'm preparing for this conference, he sent me a thing. He said, look, all the Sharia screening, they accept Monsanto as a valid stock. Monsanto, as you know now, has been sued by people who have got cancer from using their weed killer or coming into contact. So he was asking, what is your take on that? This is not sustainable. We can't say it is Sharia compliant. So, and there are many things there, like this, which need to be looked at. In this conference, we are presenting a paper which is very, very interesting, Omar, for you. We are showing that if we do a Sharia universe and we do an ethical universe, and we take the common core of the two, right? And we look at the performance of the two separately and the common core. The common core does better than either one separately. So what's the problem? It's a win-win situation. But it then meets, you see, the ethical stakeholder will look at it as good for him or her. The Sharia investor will look at it as good for him or her. So you can reach out the whole new, stakeholder market. As I said, I feel that I have given the best I could, even sacrificing my personal interests, in terms of earning more or doing whatever else. This is not something this has been very satisfying. But at the same time, I can see that we have reached a cul-de-sac, and I see my job now as to dig us out of this and motivate the new generation to say, let's go and do something else. I'm here. I'm looking at the moment in seeing if we can raise innovative sources of capital or manage investment pools which are properly done to get the whole community excited. And some of the products, like the Kafel products, need an investment platform. We don't have it. Until we create that, we can't have the Kafel, because there will be the same problem. Step 2, you can't do anything. Step 3, you get stuck. So we need to develop. So if we develop that infrastructure and motivate people, I think some of the bigger banks will crack and again open up, like HSBC Amana. That's the point we need to take it. The absolute high was the change in the step duty legislation. Not many people are familiar with how difficult it is to get something into the Finance Act. Something which is not really, hasn't got voting behind it, right? I say, fine. Gordon Brown will say, maybe next year. And then the government changes, and then the whole thing goes 5 years down the road. So it's easy to throw the can down the road. So that was really a high moment that we managed to pin that, not only the change, but also the attitude of the government that we are happy to create level playing field. So no sheikh or anybody could come and say we can't do it in UK because the regulation is against us. I said, no, nothing is against you, do it. I think the low point was the financial crisis. because that meant people like HSBC and others were no longer able to stay, Lloyds, to stay in the space. But that could again lead to a next high point, that when they come to sort of rethink, which we are coming now to rethink banking altogether, probably there will be a separation of retail and investment banking. I don't think this fiat money system can last forever. I mean, you can only pump up to, as Lord Turner says, you can go to the devil or death. So there is a limit to that, right? And as I said in Scotland last time, that alchemy always fails. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute honour.
Thank you very much. I hope this helps.